You've been following this channel for a while, you know I've had quite a few opportunities to unbox, set up, and try StarLink. I was actually in the StarLink beta program before they made the rectangular dishes. I was the first of many of my friends, mind you, to get access to that circular dish, and I tried it for about a year, and then T-Mobile 5G home internet became available in my area, so I canceled the service, and I've basically just had a very special dish, you know, a very cool looking table that we left outside mostly to put plants on. And I was told by the StarLink team when I messaged them, when I was like, you know what, I've decided the service isn't right for me. When I cancel this, can I give it to someone else? Could I donate it to Ukraine or whatever? And they said, no, it is geo-locked to your address, and once you cancel service, it cannot be reactivated. Well, I'm happy to report StarLink has made a lot of changes since that last video, and I am no longer in possession of the StarLink thanks to these updates, which are great for reducing e-waste overall. Let's begin. So we were doing some fall cleaning, I guess you could call it, and just getting rid of a bunch of old stuff, donating old equipment that I didn't need anymore, as well as selling some things that had a little bit of value. But StarLink was definitely an interesting one, because I knew that this dish was old, and I had known from previous conversations with SpaceX that they said, yeah, sorry, basically if you cancel, there's nothing you can really do about it. But something clicked in my head after all of this time. These may not be necessarily new recent changes, but I realized I was seeing news articles saying that you could buy StarLink now at like Home Depot or even Costco in some countries. And that got me thinking, wait a minute, if you buy a StarLink from Home Depot or whatever, you're not paying SpaceX, which, you know, when I signed up originally during that beta program, you had to order it from SpaceX. There was, of course, no other way to get access to the dish. And when you signed up for it and paid for the equipment, that's when, you know, they set up your account and they have your credit card or whatever on file. So the billing's all kind of ready to go by the time you unbox it. But I was like, if these third-party sellers are able to, you know, bill you, you're paying Home Depot for the StarLink dish, that must mean that it's possible to activate a dish without having to pay SpaceX directly. So I looked it up, you know, I did some research because I hadn't been doing much with the StarLink dish, obviously. It just been kind of sitting around the house holding up my wife's plants, which was very futuristic and cool, by the way. But everything I was seeing online was suggesting that yes, you can actually sell these dishes now, assuming whoever you sell it to has availability in their area, and I would also assume it's probably restricted to whatever country you're in. Everything I'm saying for today's video is going to be explicitly referring to the United States. There could be different rules and regulations in other countries, I don't know, but basically because the StarLink box was so big and so heavy, I wasn't that interested in selling it online because I knew that shipping was going to be a pain in the butt, and of course if the person took delivery of it and then found out that it wasn't really good for their area, shipping it all back, that was going to be a huge mess. So I just sold it to someone locally, and I made sure in contact with them that they checked the website to ensure that visibility was available in their area before we met up, because he was probably an hour away from me. But I walked him through the process, which SpaceX has actually made pretty simple now. So pretty much the only things you need if you're buying a used StarLink dish is either a kit number, which luckily for me was on the side of the original StarLink packaging. So thank God, you know, I'm the crazy weirdo that keeps on to all these Apple boxes. I also kept the old StarLink box, which had the kit number you needed to reactivate that StarLink and connect it to the network. And also you need to make sure that even if you've canceled your StarLink, you know, I haven't paid a membership fee for it in over a year now, but I went into my account on a website, doesn't show up in the mobile app for some reason, but you have to scroll down on your account page to where it says transfer, and you don't need to have the other person's phone number or email address. I mean, it helps if you do. You can send them a link that will walk them through how to activate the StarLink, but this was just some guy online that was interested in picking it up, so I didn't want to ask for all of his personal information. You know, I didn't want to give out my personal information either, so I just hit the transfer button, which basically tells SpaceX that that dish equipment, you know, with its serial number and everything, is no longer connected to you. And when the next person downloads the StarLink app, they actually get an option, like which StarLink dish do you have? And lo and behold, the circular StarLink actually shows up within the app now, which is really really cool. When I first signed up, that was not a thing. It was just kind of like, okay, you are in the beta program. You might be able to get a connection of some kind. It was very vague, but now, thankfully, the guy who bought it from me could select the circular dish option, put in the kit number, and of course made sure that my account was no longer attached to that StarLink device, because SpaceX wants to make sure that someone can't just like steal the StarLink dish off of your roof and then reactivate it somewhere else. That won't work, so you have to manually put in the website that yes, I want someone else to use this dish now. And I made sure he checked the availability on the website, so he looked it up and said yes, there's availability in my area. Most of the United States actually gets pretty decent coverage. And we met up in person. Very nice guy. He took a look at everything. I tried to put it all back in the box as best I could. It was not in great condition either, so I wasn't selling it at a profit or anything. I was charging about half what I paid for it because there was some, scratches on the dish. It was on my roof for over a year. There were some signs of wear on the router as well. And of course, this is the first generation StarLink equipment with the PoE injector and everything. So it was not pretty, it was dusty, and the StarLink router they include is not as good as the new equipment they're shipping. So I wasn't trying to flip it for a huge profit or anything, but he looked at it, he was happy with it, and then he went off. And technically, I marked it as sold at that point, and I really didn't have to reach out to him ever again, but just out of genuine curiosity and wanting to make sure that this guy actually got equipment that functions and works for him, I reached out a couple hours later because I knew it was going to take a while for him to drive home, and I asked him, hey, I know this is weird. Most people don't reach back out to you after the sale has been completed, but I was like, how is the StarLink working for you? I knew he was in a much more rural area than I was, so of course the 5G home internet thing wasn't going to work out for him, but he said he was gaming on it and it was working great for him. He told me he'd been watching a few YouTube videos on how to set up the StarLink. Thankfully, I don't think he saw any of mine, which would have been kind of weird, but yeah, he said he was getting up to about 190 megabits download and that it was working great for him. So even though that dish had potted plants on it for almost a year and had not been activated, and originally when I asked SpaceX if I could do something with the dish, they said no, it's geo-locked just to your address. You can't sell it, you can't use it anywhere else. They have thankfully updated the network to make it basically just as simple as any internet service really should be, which is just that, hey, if you're willing to pay the membership fee and you have the equipment, then it can just boot up, look at the sky, and connect. So yes, of course, he did have to pay the activation fee to get it online, but he paid about half what he would have had to pay if he bought it brand new, and now he's getting reasonably fast satellite internet, which was not previously available to him. So I think it's really great that SpaceX has kind of updated the network to be so backwards compatible considering how old that dish is. It's not the latest hardware and it hasn't been activated in a long time. I was honestly kind of concerned that maybe it had been bricked because the StarLink was unplugged. It hadn't gotten any new firmware or software updates for over a year, and I'd heard of instances where people saying if their StarLink was left in a box for too long and they tried to set it up, it didn't work. But now it feels like they've addressed all that and fixed it, and that makes me feel so much better because it felt just kind of wasteful and unnecessary to have an old StarLink dish sitting around doing nothing. And I really wanted it to go to someone who needed it, and I wanted them to get a good deal on it and everything. So thank you, SpaceX, for making it easy to transfer a StarLink dish to someone else and increasing the availability for the country worldwide. This is just exactly how an internet service provider should work. They're very reasonable about the setup process, and they're trying to reduce as much e-waste as possible with basically the first generation StarLink dish, even though I unboxed it like over 2.5 years ago now. It's kind of crazy how long it's been. But this kind of completes the StarLink saga for me, at least at my current home address, and we'll be sure to check in on StarLink in the Philippines in the future, and also check in on my friend Mike, who's been using StarLink mobile on the go, like while his vehicle is in motion, and how his experience has been going with it. But overall, I'm just so happy that there's an internet service like this that you can actually get decent broadband connection anywhere on Earth, even in the middle of the ocean. That's great. It's probably helped countless people stay connected, and I thought I'd keep you guys in the loop on the process. So let me know if you have any other questions when it comes to selling your own StarLink, if you're interested in doing that in the future, down in the comments below. And thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your StarLink sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.